When UFC fighters finally face off at the ceremonial weigh-ins, their actions and level of intensity often set the tone for their upcoming bouts. In most cases, athletes are content to stare each other down for a brief moment and then follow that up by shaking hands. Of course, some fighters use the weigh-ins as an opportunity to either build on or create tension and give the fans something to talk about. Oftentimes, UFC competitors who make the most out of their pre-fight stare-downs also happen to be some of the promotion's biggest stars, which obviously isn't a coincidence. With that in mind, we've decided to take a look at 10 of the most heated pre-fight encounters we've seen inside the UFC. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 of the most intense weigh-in face-offs in UFC history. Number 10. Conor McGregor vs Nate Diaz 2. After the infamous water bottle throwing incident that took place at the pre-fight press conference, the tension between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor was at an all-time high heading into their rematch at UFC 202. As such, when the two faced off at their ceremonial weigh-ins, things naturally got a bit heated. After taking a moment to flex on the scale, Diaz immediately hopped off, got into his fighting stance, and then proceeded to stare down the Irishman. McGregor then responded by putting his fists up and a verbal joust began to ensue. The confrontation got particularly wild after Diaz threw a right hand in his opponent's direction, with the action even prompting UFC President Dana White and the local authorities to step in and separate the two. In the end, the memorable scrum helped UFC 202 sell a whopping 1.65 million pay-per-views, which at the time was the biggest selling event in the company's history. As for the fight itself, McGregor would end up earning a hard-fought majority decision victory. Number 9. Ronda Rousey vs Bethe Correia. Brazil's Bethe Correia made a name for herself in the UFC by defeating Ronda Rousey's close friends and fellow four-horsewomen Jessamyn Duke and Shayna Baszler. To make their eventual UFC 190 bout even more personal, Correia made some highly controversial remarks about Rousey, suggesting that the former Olympian might commit suicide after a potential UFC loss. Given that Rousey's father had committed suicide, the statement was considered to be in very poor taste. Following the heated build-up, the bad blood finally reached a boiling point when the two women came face to face. During the routine weigh-in, Rousey walked over to the challenger and got right into her face. Meanwhile, Correia literally began to scream at Ronda Rousey in what would turn out to be a very memorable pre-fight exchange. For as good as the build-up was, the fight itself was a brief one-sided affair, as at UFC 190, Ronda Rousey would end up knocking her opponent out in just 34 seconds to retain her bantamweight belt. Number 8. Anderson Silva vs VITOR BELFORT. Despite being fellow countrymen, there was still plenty of heat between two of the biggest names in Brazilian MMA in Anderson the Spider Silva and VITOR the Phenom Belfort when they finally clashed at UFC 126. Part of the beef between the two was based on a remark that Belfort made during an interview with MMA Junkie, as when discussing Silva, Belfort remarked that when you say silly things and when you do silly things, it's because you're worried and you're trying to wear a mask. In response to the statement, the Spider decided to bring an actual mask to the weigh-in. So, after placing the mask on his face, Silva decided to literally butt heads with his opponent in what was one of the most unique and intense pre-fight face-offs you'll ever see. At UFC 126, Silva retained his middleweight title as he used a highlight reel-worthy front kick that put his rival away in the very first round. Number 7. BJ Penn vs Nick Diaz. When it comes to facing off, Nate Diaz isn't the only Diaz brother who knows how to get people talking. Heading into his UFC 137 showdown with BJ Penn, Nick Diaz nearly caused the fight to happen prematurely. Despite being on relatively good terms during the promotional build-up, Nick Diaz decided to take things up to the next level during the weigh-in. Once it came time to face off, the Stockton product decided to get physical and literally used the top of his head to shove BJ Penn. Fortunately, Dana White was able to intervene before the situation could escalate further. The contest itself would end up earning Fight of the Night honours, with Nick Diaz earning a unanimous decision victory. Number 6. Rory MacDonald vs Robbie Lawler 2. Ruthless Robbie Lawler and Rory the Red King MacDonald took part in a pair of contests that were as memorable as they were brutal. Of course, the weigh-ins leading up to their second encounter served as an excellent prelude to the fight that followed. After weighing in, a fired-up Lawler walked right over to MacDonald and was met with a clenched fist held right next to his face. Following a tense and lengthy stare-down, the defending welterweight champ swatted Rory MacDonald's hand away. Of course, what made the weigh-in so memorable was not only the intensity displayed, but the fact that they also brought that intensity into the octagon. Their UFC 189 showdown lived up to all the hype and then some, with Lawler retaining his crown in a contest that is widely considered to be the greatest fight in UFC history. Number 5. Jon Jones vs Rashad Evans. Prior to their anticipated grudge match in 2012, Jon Jones and Sugar Rashad Evans were considered to be good friends and teammates. Unfortunately, that friendship ultimately turned into a bitter rivalry once the pair were scheduled to fight at UFC 145. Heading into the match, Evans was looking to regain his light heavyweight crown by becoming the first man to legitimately beat Jon Jones inside the cage. As expected, the weigh-ins showcased the animosity between the friends turned foes, as we witnessed them get into each other's faces in a slightly awkward, albeit intense exchange. While both men looked like they would have been more than happy to throw down right then and there, they were able to keep their emotions in check. When the cage door finally shut, Jones was able to control the action on his way to earning a convincing decision victory. Number 4. Conor McGregor vs Dustin Poirier. When the notorious Conor McGregor is in town, there is rarely a dull moment. And the weigh-ins leading up to his UFC 178 bout with Dustin the Diamond Poirier served to illustrate that fact. Prior to the match, the Irishman had gotten under Poirier's skin with his typical pre-fight trash talk.
Every single contest he gets in, he hits one knee. He does a gust of wind and he does the chicken dance.
So much so, in fact, that the Diamond had to be restrained before he could even get close enough for the ceremonial face-off. McGregor even attempted to slap Poirier while both men exchanged a few verbal jabs, with Dana White of course standing between them. When UFC 178 finally arrived, McGregor managed to put his opponent away with relative ease by scoring an early first-round TKO victory. Number 3. Wanderlei Silva vs Rampage Jackson 3. The rivalry between Quinton Rampage Jackson and Wanderlei Silva dates all the way back to the early 2000s, when the two MMA legends both competed for the now defunct Japanese promotion Pride. By the time they met in the UFC for the first time, they had already collided twice before, with Silva having already secured a pair of knockout victories. Prior to their third encounter at UFC 192, things took a physical turn during the weigh-ins. While the two stood face to face, Silva swayed from side to side, before eventually shoving his opponent across the stage. However, Rampage refused to take the bait, and instead of trying to retaliate, he decided to laugh it off. When it came time for the trilogy fight, Jackson got a measure of revenge, as he knocked out his longtime rival in round 1. Number 2. Ronda Rousey vs Holly Holm. Holly Holm and the then UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion Ronda Rousey's UFC 193 title bout would go down as one of the most memorable fights in all of women's MMA. Of course, their infamous face-off prior to the contest also left a lasting impression with MMA fans. After stepping off the scales, Rousey rushed over to the challenger in Holm, who didn't appear the least bit intimidated. She then put her fist in the air, which prompted a bit of a tussle between the two. Once they were separated by the always dependable Dana White, Rousey then proceeded to tell Holly Holm that she was gonna get it on fight night.
All you being sweet, I see right now that it's fake and you're gonna get it on Sunday.
Well, Holm did indeed get it. If it means the UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship. So, in what would go down as the most shocking upset the sport has ever seen, Holly Holm ended up knocking out her previously unbeaten opponent with a perfectly placed head kick. Number 1. Anderson Silva vs Chael Sonnen 2. Anderson Silva vs Chael Sonnen is easily one of the greatest middleweight rivalries in UFC history. In their first encounter, Sonnen dominated the Brazilian for nearly 5 rounds before ultimately being submitted in the closing moments of the contest. The initial results set the stage for a highly anticipated rematch at UFC 148. And while the trash-talking Portland native often played the role of the instigator, it was Silva who crossed the line when the two squared off at the weigh-ins. During the pre-fight festivities, the then middleweight champ walked right up to his opponent and hit him with a shoulder strike that landed flush on his jaw. To his credit, Sonnen kept his cool, even when Silva followed it up by taunting him. Unfortunately for Sonnen, he would once again fail to capture UFC gold, when, after controlling Silva throughout the first round, the champ would answer with a big knee to the body in the second, which resulted in a TKO victory. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and we'll see you on the next video.